إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا وسيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما أما بعد فإن أصدق الكلام كلام الله وأحسن الهدي هدي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وشر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار وبعد. Indeed, we have discussed some of the principles and some of the foundations that the methodology of Ahlul Sunnah is based upon. We said that Ahlul Sunnah, they have a manhaj and they have a methodology, yusiruna alay, a methodology that they traverse upon and that they follow. And from that methodology, brothers and sisters, is that which is related to defense and protection of the very methodology that we speak of. Ahlul Sunnah understand that from their responsibilities is to protect and to defend and to guard this methodology. For indeed they remain the vanguards of this methodology on earth. In this dunya, there is no one that defends the methodology of Ahlul Sunnah as-Sahihah. The methodology of Ahlul Sunnah, that true sound methodology, free from additions and accretions, other than Ahlul Sunnah themselves, Ahlul Hadith, Ahlul Athar. And thus, brothers and sisters, this affair, they understand its importance because they know that the Tawheed that the prophets and the messengers came with, it is not protected and preserved except by way of this. The Sunnah that the Messenger ﷺ came with, it is not protected and preserved except by way of this. And it was due to negligence concerning protecting the methodology of the prophets and the messengers that the previous nations, their manhaj and their methodology, it went to waste, it was destroyed, it was lost. And so now when we look at the deen of Isa, it is other than the deen that Allah Azza wa Jal sent him with, or the followers, the so-called followers of Isa. When we look at those who claim to follow Musa, the religion that they are upon is other than the deen that Musa left his followers with. Why? Because of negligence concerning this affair. So they protect and they defend. And of course, their defense revolves around those newly invented practices that pervert and taint that pure, pristine, clear message of the prophets and the messengers, and as it relates to this ummah, the Messenger Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. They understand that these affairs, whether it be innovation or whether it be falling into various forms of kufr, likewise ma'asi, that these things lead to and are a bridge to shirk and a bridge to the downfall or to the destruction of Tawheed. And thus they defend. And from the things, brothers and sisters, that the carriers of this message in our time, they defend this manhaj and this methodology from, is they defend it from those who claim to carry it, but are upon other than its way. And they make their affair clear to the people. Why? Because their affair is ambiguous. Their affair, many of the people may believe that they are the people of truth, while in actuality they are leading the Ummah al-Islamiyah to a path of destruction. The Ummah al-Islamiyah and those who are present within it from the general people, there are certain individuals in and among the Ummah that they honor and respect and that they turn to for guidance. If those individuals claim and those people claim to be upon a way that is the way of the prophets and the messengers, while in actuality they are upon falsehood, but they resemble the people of truth, they look just like them, they sound just like them, it is therefore more imperative that the people of truth clarify who they are. Because if the people are going to become and going to get misguided by anyone, it is not going to be the one that is clearly upon falsehood. Rather, it is the one, and it is going to be by way of the one who resembles the person of truth. And so this form of innovation, this obscure, this deceptive innovation, is known in our time, and its manifestation in our time is al-Hizbiyah. Hizbiyah, the partisanship and clinging to certain leaders, certain rumuz, certain so-called scholars and certain speakers, certain groups and parties. This Hizbiyah is something that is dispraised in the book of Allah and in the sunnah of his messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam and upon the tongues of the Salaf of this ummah. For it leads to this splitting and this division that is present within the ummah. And that, brothers and sisters, then, it is important that we understand some of its signs and some of its alamat and some of its characteristics, that we too may be acquainted with it. From its characteristics, brothers and sisters, is that this affair of Hizbiyah, this group partisanship and affiliation to something other than the truth, something that resembles the truth, principles and qawaid that resemble the principles of the people of truth, has sifat and has manifestations. From the greatest of its manifestations, of course, is at-tafarruq, al-furqa fi dinillahi subhanahu wa ta'ala, splitting and dividing the ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Those who affiliate themselves to these varying groups and parties that resemble the people of truth, when this individual affiliates himself to a group and he has no concern except with that group, except with that party, except with their meetings, except with the writings of their leaders, except with the works of their thinkers, and they split away and separate themselves from the book of Allah and from the sunnah of his messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and that is not in completion, because of course they will claim to follow verses of the book of Allah, they will read the Quran and the sunnah, na'am, but when they separate themselves from the Quran and the sunnah and the principles of the Quran and the sunnah in that which they practice, whether they realize it or not, then those who do so have formed a split in this ummah. Whether it is 5 individuals or 5,000. That is a split, since it splits away from the book and from the sunnah and from the way of the Sahaba ridwanullahi alayhim ajma'een. And then another individual rises and he claims that there is a cause that we should concern ourselves with, and that we're going to formulate a group concentrating upon this cause. And then he begins to write, and then he writes whether magazines or books, literature, and then he calls people towards that way, and that way again splits away from the book and the sunnah in certain issues, and they group themselves around this individual, and they give themselves a title and a name. Then there is another split in the ummah, and this cycle, it continues until the ummah is not one ummah upon the book of Allah and upon the sunnah of the messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Rather, it is a split, divided ummah. Kullu hizbin bima ladayhim farihun, as Allah Azza wa Jal has mentioned, every group pleased with that which they have. And thus, Ahlul Sunnah, they fight against this group partisanship, regardless of what people say about it, and regardless of how people try to sugarcoat it. Oh, we should praise these efforts. Kullun ala thaghar. Everyone is upon a border from the borders of Islam, they say. Rather, we should celebrate the diversity that is present within the ummah. La ya akhi. The deen of Allah Azza wa Jal does not celebrate religious diversity within its ranks. Rather, our ummah is one ummah. Our deen is one deen. Our methodology is one. And we are against anyone that splits away from it. And we clarify that which is related to that splitting until they return to that one haqq. The deen of Allah Azza wa Jal is wahid. As Hudayfa radiallahu anhu, he mentions, Inna ad-dalalata haqqa ad-dalala, an ta'rif ma kunta tunkir, wa tunkir ma kunta ta'rif, wa iyaka wa talawun fi ad-din, fa inna din Allahi wahid. He said that indeed dalala, true misguidance. He said misguidance, true misguidance, is that you deem as good that which you used to speak against, and that you speak against that which you used to deem as good. Wa iyaka wa talawun fi ad-din. And be aware of changing your colors in the religion. For indeed the deen of Allah Azza wa Jal is one. One deen, one methodology, one path, one way. Similarly, from the characteristics of the people of Hizbiyah is their rejection of the truth. Rejecting haqq because it doesn't coincide with that which they were either nurtured upon believing, or with that which the leader of their group and of their party, that which he has written in his writings, or the thinker that they follow, or these men of understanding that they see as their leaders. Similarly, from their characteristics is taqdees al-ashkhas. That is, that there are certain individuals that they raise and exalt. And that those individuals, they raise and exalt them in some instances above the station of the messenger himself, alayhi salatu wassalam. And that is, that they raise individuals claiming that in this ummah, as is the case, for example, with the extreme Sufiya, who raise their saints and their peer and their leaders to a station that is above the station of the Prophet, alayhi salatu wassalam. And they claim that it is possible that someone from this ummah may reach a higher level than even the prophets and the messengers. And they say, using in that regard the qissa and the story of Musa and Khadir, that here we have, they say, Musa alayhi salatu wassalam, who was a prophet and a messenger from the prophets and the messengers of Allah. And he set out upon a mission to seek Khadir. And when he found him, he said, Hal attabi'uka. He said, can I follow you, that I may benefit from that which Allah has given you from rushd, from guidance? And so here they say we have an example of someone who is a regular individual, but Allah Azza wa Jalla has given him a special knowledge and understanding, who is above in this regard the messenger Musa. And so it is possible, they say, that an individual may reach that station. And that, of course, is falsehood and batil, since Khadir was from the prophets and the messenger, or from the prophets, upon that which is most correct. Similarly, brothers and sisters, on a lower level, we have those who raise the founders of their groups, the founder of their party, to a station, brothers and sisters, number one, that they do not deserve. Raise them and make them as though they are scholars, when in many cases they are not scholars. They are not considered from the ulama. regardless of how popular they may be, and regardless of how famous they have become, and regardless of how well known their names are. The scholars are well known by the ulama. The ulama, they know who the scholars are, and they establish such and such is an alim, such and such is a man of ilm and sunnah and hadith. They know. But as far as these thinkers and these individuals who are founders of these groups and parties, many of them are not even considered scholars except by the general person, the general people. So not only do they raise them from their level to the level of being a scholar, but they raise them above that and permit that they should legislate in the deen of Allah Azza wa Jal that which Allah Azza wa Jal has not legislated. They permit that rulings and verdicts may be passed in contradiction to the book of Allah, contradiction to the sunnah of his messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and those rulings are followed by the whole of the group, because this is our path and our way and our methodology, and this is how the ummah is going to rise, they claim. And we must have strict obedience to our leaders, they claim. Similarly, from the characteristics of the people of Hizbiyah is them following the mutashabihat, following that which is ambiguous from the verses of the book of Allah Azza wa Jal, and from the sunnah of his messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Those ahadith that are, in terms of their wording, one may possibly extrapolate more than one meaning. And so they take from those ahadith that which establishes and fortifies and supports their group, supports their fikr, supports their idea. And of course, if anyone takes one hadith in isolation or one verse in isolation, it is possible to establish and to found or to bring about a foundation for anything by taking verses and ahadith in isolation. And so they follow that which is ambiguous from the book of Allah and from the sunnah of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam and from the statements of the Sahaba ridwanullahi alayhim, and oftentimes take that which is not established upon any of the companions ridwanullahi alayhim ajma'een. Similarly, from their methodology is al-istidlalu bil-mansukh, is that they use as evidence that which has been abrogated, whether from the book of Allah or from the sunnah of his messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but quite regularly from the statements of the ulama, from the statements of the scholars. That a great scholar may have had a statement that he mentioned during an early stage in the life of that scholar, and he may possibly have praised an individual or praised a person from among the founders of these groups, or praised a group perhaps in terms of their work, and what was apparent to him was that which they were upon didn't contradict the Quran and the Sunnah and the methodology of the Salaf. So he praised them, and then it became clear that in actuality that which they were upon was falsehood, and they opposed the methodology of the Sahaba in a number of ways. And so when that becomes clear, he takes another statement and he establishes the fact that these individuals have opposed the truth. But they will hold on to the early statement. They hold on to that first statement that is now null and void. That position that is now abrogated by the latter statement, by the statement that has come after the initial statement that was made. And what follows from that is that they likewise, from their methodology, is that they follow the zallat of the ulama. The Salaf of this ummah, they knew, and they would say that the alim, there is not an alim except that he has a zallah. There is not an alim except that he has a slip, except that he makes a mistake, except that he passes a verdict that is not correct, except that he opposes that which is the truth in an issue, striving to come to the haqq, but he opposes the truth. And of course he receives one reward, as the Prophet ﷺ, he said that if the mujtahid, he strives to come to the truth, and he passes a verdict, and he makes a mistake, then he receives one reward. But if he is correct, he receives two. Yani one for his correctness, and one for his striving. So the alim that makes a mistake, then of course he's still rewarded for his effort and his striving and his sincerity. But that mistake is not to be followed. And this is another one of their methodologies and one of their paths. That they make tatabbu' of the zallat of the ulama. They follow the slips and mistakes and the errors of the ulama. And thus by way of doing so, they create a deen, another deen for themselves. But massage their guilt by saying that such and such an alim said it. And thus the Salaf of this ummah, they used to say, Man tatabba'a zallati al-ulama kharaja min al-Islam. The one who follows up the slips of the alim and of the scholars, then he leaves Islam. Why? Because if he follows the error of an alim in this issue, and then he follows the error of an alim in another issue, and then he follows the error of another alim in a third issue, and then he follows another mistake in a fourth issue, and he follows that which is not correct in a fifth issue. When we gather these issues, what do we have? We have a deen other than the deen of the Prophet ﷺ. Those ulama, when they came to those conclusions, they did so based upon ijtihad and striving to come to that which was correct. But they're human beings. And so when they make that mistake, it is not to be followed. But the path and their way is that they will follow these slips and these errors and these mistakes. The ulama do not receive wahi, ikhwan. They follow the wahi. They do not receive revelation, they follow it. They were not given wahi from the sama. They are not given revelation from above the heavens. Rather, they study it. And so their mistakes are not to be followed. Since following their mistakes, if they make them, is a surefire way for embarking upon a path of misguidance. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Bismillah walhamdulillah wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala wa ba'd. Indeed, brothers and sisters, from their way and from their path is that which is recognized from their methodology. And that is, as much as they try and hide that which they are really upon and make it obscure, their reality is known by their ulfa, by their companionship. And the Salaf of this ummah, they used to say, Man khafiyat alayna bid'atuhu lam takhfa alayna ulfatu. They used to say that the one whose innovation is hidden from us, is obscure from us, then indeed his companionship will not be obscure from us. His companionship will not be hidden. And the one who is upon an innovation and an innovated way, then you will see that manifest in the companions that he has, in his associations. People of Sunnah, ikhwan, they affiliate themselves with the people of Sunnah and they love to be with them. For indeed they help them upon the path. While the one who has deviation in his heart, he accompanies those who are upon a similar way to himself, even then if he makes his way obscure. Another one of their methodologies, and another one of the things that they call to and that they pander over and desire for. And another one of the things that their groups are built upon is at-tajmi'. That is gathering. That their methodologies revolve around gathering as many numbers as they can. And so they rejoice over having a huge amount of followers. And they rejoice over the large number of people that now appear to be following them and with them. Because they understand from that this is an indication of the fact that we are upon the truth. And that is how the people will see it. And there is nothing further from the haqq. Allah Azza wa Jal throughout the Quran has dispraised numbers, has dispraised majorities. وَإِن تُطِعْ أَكْثَرَ مَنْ فِي الْأَرْضِ يُضِلُّوكَ عَنْ سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. And if you follow the majority of those who are upon the earth, then they will misguide you from the way of Allah. And Allah Azza wa Jal has said, And indeed most of them do not believe in Allah Azza wa Jal, except that they are people of shirk, except that they are mushrikun. Allah Azza wa Jal throughout the Quran has dispraised numbers, dispraised majorities. The people of the truth have always been small in number in relation to those who are around them. But these jama'at and these groups and parties, when their concern is nothing but to gather, then they will praise the amount of numbers that they had. And they will praise the turnouts that they have. And they will praise the many thousands of people who participated in their events. And their whole methodology revolves around gathering numbers, not purifying the ranks, not correcting and making the affairs crystal clear, not returning the people back to that which the Sahaba were upon. That is secondary as far as they are concerned. The main thing is to gather as many numbers as possible. And so we will hear that such and such a gathering, there was 10,000 present. And that there were 10,000 individuals who participated, and 20 and 30,000. And their concern is nothing but tajmir. And so their lectures and their speakers, the speakers they invite, their callers, their view is to attract as many people to their misguidance as possible. And that is something that we must be aware of. For indeed the way and the methodology of the people of innovation and Hizbiyya, particularly in our time, ikhwan, as obscure as it may be, our scholars have made it clear, bihamdillah. And so it is imperative that we acquaint ourselves with that which they have clarified, that Allah Azza wa Jal keeps us upon this straight way. Nas'Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wa fikna wa iyaakum lima yuhibbuhu wa yardah. Wa sallallahu wa sallam.